Welcome to my sleep science channel. Tell me where you watch it. Tonight, we begin a quiet journey toward one of the most beautiful and peaceful places known in our solar system. Far beyond Earth, beyond Mars and Jupiter, there exists a giant world surrounded by elegant rings. This world is Saturn. Even people who know very little about astronomy often recognize Saturn immediately because of its famous rings, which make it look almost like something imagined in a dream. Yet Saturn is very real, and for centuries it has inspired feelings of wonder, calm, and curiosity. Saturn is the sixth planet from the Sun. On average, it travels around the Sun at a distance of about 900 million miles. Because it is so far away, sunlight reaching Saturn is much weaker than the sunlight that warms Earth. If you could stand somewhere near Saturn, the sun would appear smaller and softer in the sky. It would still shine brightly, but it would no longer dominate the heavens the way it does from Earth. Instead, the surrounding darkness of space would feel deeper and more peaceful. Ancient people knew Saturn long before telescopes existed. They saw it as a bright point of light moving slowly among the stars. Because of its slow motion, many cultures connected Saturn with patience, wisdom, and the passage of time. The Romans named the planet after Saturn, the god associated with agriculture and abundance. That ancient name has survived for thousands of years and is still used today. Saturn itself is enormous. More than 700 Earths could fit inside its volume. Yet, despite its tremendous size, Saturn has a surprisingly gentle appearance. Unlike rocky worlds with mountains and sharp landscapes, Saturn is made mostly of hydrogen and helium. There is no solid surface like the ground beneath our feet. Instead, the planet gradually changes from upper clouds to deeper layers of gas and liquid. In many ways, Saturn resembles a vast ocean of atmosphere, stretching downward into darkness. One of the most interesting things about Saturn is its color. It does not appear bright blue like Neptune or deep red like Mars. Instead, Saturn displays soft shades of pale gold, creamy yellow, and light brown. These colors give the planet a warm and peaceful appearance. Through a telescope, Saturn often looks less like a harsh world and more like a quiet lantern floating in space. The rings surrounding Saturn are perhaps its most famous feature. From a distance, they appear delicate and thin. Although they stretch across hundreds of thousands of miles, they are surprisingly narrow compared with their width. Made mostly of ice and tiny rocky particles, the rings reflect sunlight beautifully. They create one of the most graceful sights anywhere in the solar system. Many people consider Saturn the most beautiful planet because of these remarkable structures. The journey from Earth to Saturn is incredibly long. Modern spacecraft require several years to reach it. Light itself, traveling faster than anything else in the universe, needs more than an hour to cross the distance between the Sun and Saturn. This immense separation reminds us just how large our solar system truly is. The planets are not crowded together. Instead, they are separated by enormous stretches of quiet emptiness. Temperatures near Saturn are extremely cold. High in the atmosphere, temperatures can fall to around -280 degrees Fahrenheit. At such temperatures, familiar experiences from Earth become impossible. Yet despite these harsh conditions, Saturn possesses a certain tranquility. There are no forests, oceans, or cities. There are only clouds, sunlight, shadows, rings, and the endless silence of space. For people looking upward from Earth, Saturn has always represented something distant and mysterious. On clear nights, amateur astronomers often describe the first sight of Saturn through a telescope as unforgettable. Even a small telescope reveals the planet and its rings, and many people are amazed to discover that the object they once thought was just a tiny point of light suddenly becomes a real world hanging in the darkness. Perhaps this is one reason Saturn feels so peaceful. It moves slowly. It changes gradually. It has existed for billions of years, quietly circling the sun while life on Earth evolved. Civilizations rose and fell, and generations of human beings looked upward with curiosity. Long before the first pyramids were built, Saturn was already there. Long after our own time has passed into history, Saturn will continue its calm journey through space. In the vastness of the universe, Saturn reminds us that not everything moves quickly. Some things unfold slowly and steadily. Some worlds inspire excitement, while others inspire peace. Saturn belongs among the peaceful ones. With its golden clouds, graceful rings, and timeless motion around the sun, it stands as one of the quiet treasures of our cosmic neighborhood. A giant world that seems to invite us to simply observe, wonder, and drift peacefully among the stars. Unlike many stars that twinkle strongly, Saturn often shines with a steady and calm light. Its brightness is gentle rather than dazzling. Under dark skies, people could easily recognize it with the naked eye, because it moved slowly compared with the other visible planets. Many ancient cultures associated Saturn with patience, age, and the slow passage of time. To observers who carefully followed the heavens, Saturn seemed almost peaceful in its motion, taking its time while crossing the background stars. In ancient Mesopotamia, astronomers carefully recorded the movements of the planets. These early sky watchers spent generations studying the heavens. They noticed patterns and cycles, creating some of the first records of planetary motion. Saturn was one of the objects they followed with remarkable dedication. Although they did not understand the true nature of planets, they recognized that these wandering lights behaved according to reliable patterns. Ancient Greek astronomers also observed Saturn. They attempted to explain why the wandering lights moved differently from ordinary stars. Philosophers and scholars developed increasingly sophisticated ideas about the universe. They imagined complex systems of circles and spheres carrying the planets through the heavens. These explanations were not entirely correct, but they represented important steps toward a deeper understanding of the cosmos. The Romans later adopted much of Greek astronomy and gave the planet its modern name. Saturn was named after an important Roman deity associated with agriculture and harvest. Festivals honoring Saturn were joyful occasions marked by celebration and abundance. Over time, the name became permanently attached to the distant world that slowly crossed the night sky. Thousands of years later, that ancient name continues to travel with the planet itself. For many centuries, Saturn remained simply a bright point of light. No one knew about its rings. No one knew it was made mostly of gas. No one imagined that dozens of moons accompanied it on its journey around the sun. To people living in those times, Saturn remained a mystery, beautiful precisely because so much about it was unknown. Everything changed during the early 17th century. A new invention, the telescope, allowed humanity to examine the heavens in ways never before possible. One of the first people to turn a telescope toward Saturn was Galileo Galilei. In 1610, he observed something strange. Saturn did not appear perfectly round. Instead, it seemed to have mysterious shapes attached to its sides. The limited power of his telescope prevented him from understanding what he was seeing. He described the appearance with confusion and wonder. Years later, improvements in telescope technology revealed the truth. Dutch astronomer Christian Huygens discovered that Saturn was surrounded by a thin ring. This discovery transformed humanity's understanding of the planet. Saturn was no longer simply another moving light. It became something extraordinary, a world unlike any other known planet. As telescopes improved further, astronomers began discovering Saturn's moons. One by one, tiny companions emerged from the darkness. Titan, Saturn's largest moon, became one of the earliest discoveries. More moons followed, each adding another layer to the growing portrait of the Saturn system. What once appeared to be a solitary point of light slowly revealed itself as an entire family of worlds. During the 19th century, Larger observatories allowed astronomers to study Saturn with greater detail. They noticed delicate structures within the rings. They observed changing cloud patterns and subtle colors across the planet. Artists and scientists worked together to create detailed drawings based on careful observations. Long before photography became common, these illustrations helped people imagine distant Saturn more clearly. The 20th century brought an entirely new era. Powerful telescopes and advanced cameras transformed astronomy. For the first time, scientists could capture detailed photographs of Saturn. Yet even these images could not fully prepare humanity for what was to come. Spacecraft eventually traveled across billions of miles to visit the giant planet directly. The world that ancient civilizations had watched with their naked eyes now appeared in breathtaking detail. Despite all these advances, there remains something wonderfully simple about seeing Saturn from Earth. On a quiet evening, far away from city lights, Saturn can still be found shining gently among the stars. Its light reaching our eyes tonight actually began its journey more than an hour ago. In a sense, every glance towards Saturn is a glimpse into the recent past. Perhaps that continuity is one reason Saturn feels timeless. Generations separated by thousands of years have all looked upon the same planet. Ancient farmers, Greek philosophers, Roman citizens, medieval scholars, Renaissance astronomers, and modern observers have all shared the experience of seeing that calm golden light suspended in the darkness. Civilizations have changed, languages have evolved, technologies have transformed human life beyond recognition. Yet Saturn itself has remained remarkably constant, quietly orbiting the sun. It continues the same journey it followed long before human history began. And tonight, just as it did for countless generations before us, Saturn still waits patiently in the night sky, offering a gentle reminder that some things move according to rhythms far older and slower than ourselves. Saturn is often described as the most beautiful planet in the solar system, and much of that reputation comes from its remarkably peaceful appearance. Unlike the bright red surface of Mars or the deep blue tones of Neptune, Saturn displays soft colors that seem calm and almost soothing. From a distance, the giant world appears wrapped in pale gold, creamy yellow, and faint shades of beige. These colors blend together so gently that the entire planet resembles a carefully painted sphere floating silently in the darkness of space. If someone could observe Saturn from far away, one of the first things they would notice would be the absence of sharp contrasts. There are no bright continents or dark oceans. There are no towering mountain ranges casting dramatic shadows. Instead, broad bands of clouds stretch around the entire planet, creating smooth patterns that gradually shift from one shade to another. The colors are subtle and quiet. They do not compete for attention. They simply exist, giving Saturn an appearance that many people find surprisingly relaxing. The reason Saturn looks golden has to do with the gases and chemicals in its atmosphere. Hydrogen and helium make up most of the planet, but small amounts of ammonia, methane, and other compounds interact with sunlight. As the sunlight passes through Saturn's upper clouds, certain colors are scattered while others become more visible. The result is the warm, pale appearance that observers on Earth have admired for centuries. Even through relatively small telescopes, Saturn often appears different from the other planets. Jupiter may reveal bold stripes and powerful storms. Mars may appear as a tiny reddish disk, but Saturn presents itself with elegance. The planet seems less turbulent and more graceful. Its colors blend together softly, and the famous rings surrounding it add an almost artistic quality that has fascinated generations of astronomers. Photographs taken by spacecraft have shown that Saturn's atmosphere contains many layers of clouds. Some layers are composed mainly of ammonia ice, while deeper levels contain different substances hidden beneath the upper haze. These cloud layers create the faint bands visible across the planet. Unlike the dramatic contrast seen on Jupiter, Saturn's cloud bands are often muted and delicate. Their subtle appearance contributes to the planet's calm character. Sunlight reaching Saturn is much weaker than the sunlight that illuminates Earth. Because Saturn lies so far from the Sun, only about 1% as much sunlight reaches it, compared with our own planet. As a result, the entire Saturn system exists beneath a softer form of daylight. Shadows are present, but they are gentler. The sunlight reflecting from the rings and clouds creates scenes that seem almost dreamlike. The rings themselves greatly influence Saturn's appearance. Stretching outward for hundreds of thousands of miles, they create one of the most recognizable shapes in the solar system. From Earth, even modest telescopes reveal the rings as delicate structures surrounding the planet. Many first-time observers describe their experience as unforgettable. They often expect Saturn to resemble a blurry point of light, only to discover a tiny world with perfectly visible rings suspended against the blackness of space. The angle of the rings changes slowly over time. Sometimes they appear wide open and spectacular. At other times, they become so thin that they nearly disappear from view. This gradual change occurs because Saturn is tilted on its axis, much like Earth. As the planet moves around the Sun during its long journey, different perspectives become visible from Earth. Decades may pass between particularly favorable views, giving astronomers something to patiently anticipate. Another remarkable feature of Saturn is its shape. Because the planet spins very rapidly, completing one rotation in roughly 10.5 hours, it is not perfectly round. The rapid rotation causes the equator to bulge outward slightly. Saturn is noticeably flattened at its poles, making it the most flattened planet in the solar system. Although this difference is subtle, it gives the giant world an appearance that is distinct from a perfect sphere. When spacecraft approached Saturn, scientists and engineers were astonished by the beauty revealed in the images. The Voyager missions during the early 1980s provided humanity with extraordinary views. Decades later, the Cassini spacecraft delivered thousands of breathtaking photographs that showed incredible details in the rings and atmosphere. Yet despite the sophistication of these images, many of Saturn's most appealing qualities remained unchanged. The soft colors, the graceful rings, and the gentle appearance that had inspired ancient sky watchers were still present. Perhaps one reason Saturn feels so peaceful is that nothing about it seems hurried. The cloud bands stretch quietly around the planet. The rings orbit with remarkable precision. The colors remain soft and understated, even from billions of miles away. Saturn gives the impression of calm stability. It is a world that does not demand attention through violence or brightness. Instead, it quietly invites observers to simply look, wonder, and appreciate the beauty that can exist in silence. On clear nights, when Saturn shines steadily among the stars, people separated by thousands of years experience the same feeling of quiet fascination. Whether viewed with the naked eye, through a telescope, or in detailed photographs captured by distant spacecraft, Saturn possesses an appearance unlike any other world. Its pale golden colors and elegant rings have made it one of the most beloved objects in the sky, a giant planet whose beauty seems perfectly suited to peaceful thoughts and long, quiet evenings beneath the stars. Saturn is so enormous that it can be difficult to truly imagine its size. Numbers alone often fail to capture what such a world actually means. Reading that Saturn is more than 70,000 miles across sounds impressive, but the mind naturally compares everything with familiar experiences on Earth. Since no object on our planet approaches the scale of Saturn, understanding its vastness requires a little patience and imagination. If Earth were reduced to the size of a small grape, Saturn would become roughly the size of a large beach ball. More than 700 Earths could fit inside Saturn's total volume. Even though Saturn is the second largest planet in the solar system, smaller only than Jupiter, it still dwarfs every rocky world. Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars together would appear tiny beside this giant world wrapped in rings. Despite its tremendous size, Saturn is surprisingly light for a planet of its dimensions. Scientists often point out one curious fact that has captured people's imagination for generations. Saturn is less dense than water. In theory, if there were an unimaginably large ocean capable of holding an entire planet, Saturn would float. Such an ocean could never exist in reality, but the idea itself gives Saturn an almost gentle quality. A world so massive somehow possesses a lower density than something as ordinary as water. Unlike Earth, Saturn does not have a solid surface where someone could stand. The transition from atmosphere to deeper layers happens gradually. Descending into Saturn would be unlike landing on a mountain or a plain. Instead, clouds would become thicker and pressure would steadily increase. Deeper still, the gases would slowly transform into exotic forms of liquid. Far beneath the visible atmosphere lies a region where hydrogen behaves in strange ways under enormous pressure. At even greater depths, scientists believe a dense core exists, composed of heavier elements. From a distance, Saturn appears almost perfectly symmetrical, yet careful measurements reveal something interesting. Saturn is noticeably flattened at the top and bottom. The planet bulges outward around its middle, giving it a slightly squashed appearance. This effect occurs because Saturn rotates very rapidly. A day on Saturn lasts only about 10.5 hours. Considering the planet's immense size, this is remarkably fast. As Saturn spins, the material near the equator experiences a stronger outward force. Over billions of years, this rapid rotation has caused the equatorial regions to expand slightly. The difference is significant enough that Saturn is considered the most flattened planet in the solar system. If viewed from certain angles, this shape becomes clearly visible, making Saturn appear different from the nearly spherical Earth. The enormous size of Saturn becomes even more astonishing when considering its surroundings. The planet is accompanied by an entire family of moons and rings. Together, they create a miniature system that resembles a small version of the solar system itself. Dozens of moons orbit the giant planet, each following its own path. Some are large enough to possess atmospheres and weather. Others are tiny, irregular objects that resemble captured asteroids. All of them move under Saturn's powerful gravitational influence. Gravity on Saturn itself is surprisingly similar to gravity on Earth, although Saturn contains far more mass. Its immense size spreads that mass over a much larger volume. As a result, the pull experienced near the upper atmosphere would feel somewhat familiar. This unexpected similarity often surprises people. A world capable of containing hundreds of Earths somehow produces a gravitational pull that is not dramatically stronger than the one we experience every day. The clouds visible from space form only a thin outer skin compared with the entire planet. If Saturn were imagined as a giant onion, colorful cloud tops would represent merely the outermost layer. Beneath them lies a vast interior extending tens of thousands of miles downward. Conditions become increasingly extreme with depth. Temperatures rise, pressures become enormous, and matter itself behaves in ways impossible to reproduce easily on Earth. Even light requires time to travel across Saturn. A signal moving at the speed of light, the fastest speed known in nature, would need several tenths of a second just to cross the planet's diameter. This may sound brief, but compared with Earth, it highlights the tremendous scale involved. Commercial airplanes, traveling at ordinary speeds, would require many days simply to circle around Saturn once, assuming such a journey were somehow possible. The rings surrounding Saturn further enhance the sense of grandeur. While the planet itself is enormous, the ring system stretches outward over hundreds of thousands of miles. If the rings could be shrunk down to fit on a table, the planet would appear like a marble sitting at the center of a delicate disk. Yet, despite their immense width, the rings are astonishingly thin. In many places, they are only tens of feet thick. This combination of vast width and remarkable thinness gives Saturn one of the most elegant structures found anywhere in the solar system. For countless generations, human beings have looked upward and wondered about the worlds beyond Earth. Saturn stands among the most impressive of those worlds. Its size is almost beyond imagination, yet its appearance remains graceful rather than intimidating. There is something strangely comforting about a planet so enormous, moving so peacefully around the sun. Nothing about Saturn seems rushed. Its great bulk rotates steadily, its rings shine softly, and its countless moons quietly accompany it through the darkness. In a universe filled with extremes, Saturn offers a reminder that immense things can also possess elegance. It is a giant, but not a violent one. It is vast, but not chaotic in appearance. Wrapped in pale golden clouds and encircled by delicate rings, Saturn continues its slow journey around the sun, carrying with it a quiet majesty that has inspired wonder for centuries. Saturn may appear solid and peaceful from a distance, but in reality, it is a world unlike the one beneath our feet. There are no continents, forests, deserts, or oceans in the familiar sense. There are no valleys carved by rivers, and no mountains rising into the sky. Instead, Saturn belongs to a category known as gas giants, enormous planets composed primarily of hydrogen and helium. These same elements are also the main ingredients of the Sun, though Saturn itself never became a star. It remained a planet, one of the great worlds that formed billions of years ago when the solar system was still young. Hydrogen is by far the most abundant substance inside Saturn. Helium comes next. Together, these two elements account for nearly all of the planet's composition. Smaller amounts of ammonia, methane, water vapor, and other compounds are mixed throughout the atmosphere, contributing to the subtle colors and cloud patterns visible from space. These ingredients create the soft golden appearance that has made Saturn one of the most recognizable objects in the heavens. Unlike Earth, Saturn does not have a clearly defined surface. On our planet, there is a distinct boundary between the atmosphere and the ground. On Saturn, such a boundary does not exist. If someone could somehow descend through the upper clouds, they would simply encounter deeper and denser layers of gas. The atmosphere would gradually become thicker and hotter. There would be no sudden moment when sky became land. Instead, the journey downward would be a slow transition into increasingly extreme conditions. The upper atmosphere of Saturn is cold and calm in appearance. Temperatures high above the clouds can reach around -280 degrees Fahrenheit. Sunlight arriving from the distant sun is much weaker than the sunlight Earth receives, giving the entire planet a subdued character. Yet beneath these frigid cloud tops lies a hidden world of rising temperatures and immense pressures. The deeper one goes, the stranger Saturn becomes. At certain depths, the pressure becomes so great that hydrogen gas transforms into liquid, even deeper inside. Scientists believe hydrogen enters an exotic state known as metallic hydrogen. In this unusual form, hydrogen behaves somewhat like a liquid metal, capable of conducting electricity. Such conditions do not naturally exist on Earth's surface. They are found only deep inside giant planets, where the weight of the upper layers creates pressures millions of times greater than those experienced in our everyday lives. Far below these layers, hidden beneath thousands of miles of gas and liquid, Saturn is believed to possess a core composed of heavier materials. This central region may contain rock, metal, and various forms of ice, compressed under extraordinary conditions. Although scientists continue to study Saturn's interior, much about this hidden core remains mysterious. No spacecraft has ever traveled deep enough to directly observe these regions. Most of what is known comes from careful measurements and mathematical models developed over many decades. One remarkable aspect of Saturn is how smoothly its atmosphere appears from a distance. The visible bands are subtle and understated compared with those on Jupiter. This gives Saturn a softer appearance. Looking at photographs of the planet, often creates a sense of calm, as though the giant world is quietly resting beneath layers of pale clouds. In reality, powerful winds and complex weather systems exist there, but their effects blend together into graceful patterns, visible from millions of miles away. The idea of a gas giant can sometimes be difficult to imagine because human experience is so strongly connected to solid surfaces. Everything familiar on Earth involves standing, walking, building, and touching. Saturn offers a completely different kind of world. It reminds us that planets do not all have to resemble Earth. Some worlds are oceans of gas, while others are frozen landscapes or volcanic realms. The universe contains many possibilities, and Saturn represents one of its most majestic examples. Because Saturn is composed mostly of light elements, its average density is surprisingly low. This fact has fascinated generations of scientists and astronomy enthusiasts. Despite containing enough material to equal approximately 95 Earths, Saturn spreads that mass across such an enormous volume that it remains less dense than water. This curious property makes Saturn unique among the planets and adds another layer to its gentle reputation. The gases making up Saturn have been part of the solar system for billions of years. Many of the hydrogen atoms now floating deep within the giant planet may have existed before Earth itself formed. Some may even trace their origins back to ancient stars that lived and died long before our sun was born. In this sense, Saturn is not merely a planet. It is a repository of incredibly ancient material, preserving elements that have journeyed through the cosmos for unimaginable spans of time. As Saturn rotates, its atmosphere moves with it, creating broad belts and subtle patterns that wrap around the entire globe. The clouds seen today have changed countless times throughout history, yet the overall appearance of the planet remains remarkably constant. Long before human beings appeared on Earth, Saturn possessed its pale golden beauty. Long after modern civilizations have become history, the giant world will likely continue circling the sun in much the same way. Perhaps this is one reason Saturn inspires such peaceful thoughts. It is a reminder that nature can create forms very different from those we know, and that even worlds made almost entirely of gas can possess incredible beauty and stability. There are no familiar landscapes on Saturn, no oceans to sail, and no mountains to climb. Yet, its vast layers of hydrogen and helium create something equally remarkable, a giant sphere of clouds and hidden depths quietly drifting through the darkness. In the immense silence between the stars, Saturn remains a world of softness rather than sharpness, of gradual transitions rather than sudden boundaries. It is a planet without a surface, a giant composed largely of the simplest elements in existence, and a peaceful reminder that some of the most extraordinary things in the universe are also among the most serene. Saturn moves through space with a patience that is difficult to appreciate in everyday life on Earth. Human beings measure time in hours, days, and years. We become accustomed to seasons changing every few months, and birthdays arriving once every 12 months. Saturn follows a much slower rhythm. Far from the warmth of the sun, this giant world completes one journey around our star only once every 29.5 Earth years. In other words, a single year on Saturn lasts almost 3 decades by human standards. This slow pace gives Saturn a unique feeling of timelessness. A child born on Earth would already be approaching adulthood before Saturn completed just half of 1 year. Entire generations of people experience only 2 or 3 Saturn years during their lifetimes. The giant planet circles the sun with remarkable consistency, following a path that has remained stable for billions of years. There is no hurry in its movement. Saturn quietly continues its journey, keeping time according to a schedule far older than human history. The average distance between Saturn and the Sun is approximately 900 million miles. Because of this great separation, the giant planet travels along an enormous orbit. Although Saturn moves through space at tremendous speed, covering thousands of miles every hour, the sheer size of its path means that completing one full revolution takes nearly 30 Earth years. Compared with Mercury, which races around the Sun every 88 days, Saturn seems almost leisurely. From Earth, astronomers have watched Saturn's slow progress across the sky for thousands of years. Ancient observers noticed that the golden planet changed its position gradually against the background stars. Unlike the Moon, which moves noticeably from night to night, Saturn shifts so slowly that patience is required to appreciate its journey. This slow motion earned the planet a reputation for steadiness and wisdom in many cultures. Long before anyone understood gravity or planetary orbits, people sensed that Saturn belonged to a slower and quieter rhythm. Saturn's path around the Sun is not a perfect circle. Like the orbits of all planets, it is slightly oval in shape. Sometimes Saturn is a little closer to the Sun, while at other times it is somewhat farther away. Yet these changes occur gradually over many years. Nothing about Saturn's movement is sudden. Its enormous mass and great distance from the Sun combine to create a graceful orbit that unfolds with extraordinary patience. The force responsible for guiding Saturn around the Sun is gravity. The Sun contains almost all of the mass in the solar system, and its immense gravitational influence keeps the planets moving along their paths. Saturn constantly falls toward the Sun, yet because it is also moving sideways at high speed, it never crashes into the star. Instead, it remains locked in a beautiful balance, endlessly circling while maintaining a respectful distance. This balance has persisted for an astonishing length of time. Scientists estimate that Saturn formed approximately 4.5 billion years ago, not long after the birth of the solar system itself. Since then, the giant planet has completed roughly 150 million orbits around the center of the Milky Way galaxy, while simultaneously circling the Sun countless times. During those billions of years, continents on Earth formed and shifted, species appeared and disappeared, and civilizations rose and fell. Through it all, Saturn continued its calm journey almost unchanged. Even sunlight takes a long time to reach Saturn. Light leaving the Sun travels at the fastest speed known in nature, yet it still requires about 80 minutes to arrive at the distant planet. On Earth, sunlight reaches us in only 8 minutes. This difference highlights the immense scale of the solar system. Saturn exists in a region where everything unfolds more slowly. The days are shorter because of the planet's rapid rotation, but the years stretch across decades, creating a rhythm unlike anything familiar on Earth. From the perspective of Saturn, the Sun would appear much smaller in the sky. It would still shine brilliantly, but it would no longer dominate the heavens as it does on Earth. The sunlight bathing Saturn is gentler and weaker. Shadows are softer. The atmosphere glows with pale colors rather than intense brightness. The entire Saturn system exists beneath a more subdued form of daylight, adding to its peaceful character. The moons surrounding Saturn accompany the giant planet on its journey around the Sun. Titan, Enceladus, and dozens of other satellites travel with their parent world like faithful companions. Together, they form a small family moving through the darkness of space. While Saturn circles the Sun once every 29.5 years, its moons dance around the planet in rhythms of their own, creating countless cycles within cycles. Looking at Saturn from Earth can create a powerful sense of perspective. The problems and concerns of daily life often seem urgent, but Saturn reminds us that the universe operates according to timescales far larger than our own. The giant planet does not rush. It has no deadlines and no schedules imposed by human expectations. It simply follows the same path it has followed for billions of years, guided by gravity and the quiet laws of nature. Perhaps this is why Saturn feels so calming to contemplate. Its motion is steady and predictable. There are no abrupt changes, only slow and graceful cycles unfolding across decades and centuries. While human history occupies a tiny fraction of time, Saturn continues its patient voyage around the Sun, carrying its rings and moons through the vast silence of space. In the darkness beyond Earth, the ringed giant moves onward with quiet certainty, season after season, orbit after orbit, age after age. Saturn remains one of the great timekeepers of the solar system, reminding us that some journeys are not meant to be hurried, and that even across billions of years, there can be beauty in simply continuing forward. Saturn experiences seasons just as Earth does, but everything unfolds at a much slower pace. On Earth, spring, summer, autumn, and winter each last only a few months. People become accustomed to flowers blooming, leaves changing color, and snow arriving within the span of a single year. Saturn follows a completely different rhythm. Because the giant planet requires almost 29.5 Earth years to complete one orbit around the Sun. Each season on Saturn lasts more than 7 Earth years. A single Saturnian summer is longer than many periods of human education, and an entire generation of children can grow up, while one season slowly gives way to the next. The reason Saturn has seasons is the same reason Earth experiences them. The planet is tilted on its axis. Saturn leans by about 27 degrees as it travels around the Sun. This tilt causes different parts of the planet to receive varying amounts of sunlight throughout its long year. As one hemisphere gradually tilts toward the Sun, it experiences summer, while the opposite hemisphere enters winter. Half a Saturn year later, the situation reverses. The changes occur so gradually that the giant world seems to drift from one season into another with remarkable patience. Because Saturn lies so far from the Sun, even summer there remains extremely cold. The difference between seasons is not like the contrast between a warm July afternoon and a snowy January morning on Earth. Instead, Saturn's seasons involve subtle changes in temperature, sunlight, and atmospheric activity. Yet despite the immense distance and low temperatures, the arrival of each season brings noticeable transformations to the planet and its magnificent rings. During Saturn's summer, one hemisphere receives more direct sunlight. Clouds in that region brighten slightly, and atmospheric activity becomes more pronounced. Meanwhile, the opposite hemisphere enters a darker and colder winter. Since each season lasts more than 7 Earth years, these changes occur with extraordinary slowness. A person observing Saturn over the course of a few months would notice very little difference. Patience measured in years is required to appreciate the giant planet's seasonal rhythms. The changing seasons also affect Saturn's famous rings. As the planet moves along its orbit, the angle at which sunlight strikes the rings gradually changes. Sometimes the northern side of the rings is illuminated, while years later, the southern side becomes brighter. From Earth, this creates beautiful variations in their appearance. There are times when the rings seem wide open and easy to admire. At other times, they appear almost edge-on, becoming so thin that they are difficult to see even through powerful telescopes. These moments, known as ring plane crossings, are particularly fascinating. Since the rings are incredibly thin, compared with their enormous width, viewing them from the side causes them to nearly disappear. To observers on Earth, Saturn briefly appears much different than usual. Yet this disappearance is only temporary. As the seasons continue their slow progression, the rings gradually reveal themselves once more, returning to their familiar and graceful appearance. The amount of daylight experienced by different regions of Saturn also changes over the course of its year. Near the poles, there are periods of extended sunlight followed by long stretches of darkness. These polar regions experience years of gradual sunrise and sunset rather than the daily cycles familiar on Earth. Such slow transitions create a world where time itself seems to move according to gentler rules. Spacecraft observations have provided remarkable glimpses of these seasonal changes. Over many years, The Cassini spacecraft watched Saturn transform from one season to another. The mission lasted long enough to observe significant changes in cloud patterns, lighting conditions, and atmospheric features. Scientists were able to witness the giant world evolving slowly over time, something impossible during shorter missions. One of the most beautiful aspects of Saturn's seasons is the way sunlight interacts with the rings. Shadows cast by the rings move gradually across the planet's cloud tops. As the seasons advance, these shadows shift and change, creating patterns of light and darkness that unfold over many years. Entire generations of astronomers have studied these slow dances of shadow and sunlight, appreciating their elegance and precision. If someone could somehow spend decades observing Saturn from a nearby moon, the passage of seasons would become a majestic experience. Instead of rapid changes, there would be a sense of continuity. Sunlight would slowly migrate across the sky. The appearance of the rings would evolve almost imperceptibly. The atmosphere would gently alter its colors and patterns. Everything would happen with extraordinary patience, as though the entire planet preferred quiet transformations over sudden changes. Human beings often live according to fast schedules. Days become weeks, weeks become months, and years pass quickly. Saturn offers a different perspective. Its seasons remind us that nature does not always move at the pace we expect. Some cycles unfold over decades. Some changes require patience to appreciate. There is beauty in these slower rhythms, just as there is beauty in the rapid changes experienced on Earth. Long before human civilizations existed, Saturn's seasons were already changing. Summer gave way to autumn, autumn to winter, and winter to spring countless times, while life on Earth evolved. Long after modern history becomes part of the distant past, those same seasonal cycles will continue. The ringed giant will remain tilted toward the sun, quietly experiencing years-long summers and winters beneath the pale glow of distant sunlight. Perhaps that is one of Saturn's most peaceful qualities. Nothing is rushed. The seasons arrive gently, linger for years, and depart with equal calm. There are no sudden transformations, only slow and graceful changes unfolding across timescales far larger than a human life. In the quiet depths of the solar system, Saturn continues its endless cycle of seasons. Wrapped in golden clouds and encircled by shimmering rings, moving patiently through the ages beneath the distant light of the sun. Sunlight reaches Saturn after a long journey across the solar system. Leaving the surface of the sun, light travels at an incredible speed. Yet it still requires roughly 80 minutes to arrive at the ringed giant. By the time those rays reach Saturn, they have spread out over such a vast distance that they provide only a small fraction of the energy received by Earth. As a result, Saturn exists beneath a softer and dimmer kind of daylight. The sun itself would appear much smaller in the sky than it does from Earth, shining brightly but no longer dominating the heavens with the same intensity. This gentle sunlight gives Saturn much of its peaceful appearance. The clouds glow with pale shades of cream, gold, and light brown. Shadows are present, but they are softer and more delicate. The rings reflect sunlight beautifully, creating subtle variations of brightness that slowly change throughout Saturn's long year. Everything about the planet seems wrapped in a calm and distant light, far removed from the warmth and brightness that define life on Earth. Although Saturn may look quiet from afar, its atmosphere is a place of constant movement. Beneath the tranquil colors lie powerful winds and shifting cloud layers. Unlike Earth, where weather systems are driven by oceans and continents, Saturn's weather develops in an atmosphere made mostly of hydrogen and helium. There are no mountains to block the winds, and no seas to shape storms. Instead, broad currents circle the planet with remarkable freedom. Some of these winds are among the fastest found anywhere in the solar system. Near the equator, they can reach speeds of more than 1,000 miles per hour. Yet despite these extraordinary velocities, Saturn does not appear chaotic. From space, The cloud bands maintain a smooth and elegant appearance. The rapid motion blends into gentle stripes and subtle patterns, giving little hint of the tremendous energy hidden beneath the upper atmosphere. The cloud tops visible from spacecraft are only the highest layers of a much deeper atmosphere. Different substances condense at different altitudes. Ammonia forms clouds in the upper regions, while deeper layers may contain ammonium hydrosulfide and water clouds. These layers are stacked upon one another like enormous blankets extending thousands of miles downward. Hidden beneath the visible atmosphere are regions of increasing pressure and temperature, places no spacecraft has ever directly explored. Because Saturn rotates very quickly, completing a day in about 10.5 hours, its atmosphere organizes itself into broad bands that wrap around the entire globe. Some regions move faster than others, creating gentle contrasts that are visible in photographs. These bands are far less dramatic than those seen on Jupiter. Their colors are muted, and their boundaries blend together softly. This contributes greatly to Saturn's calm and graceful appearance. Storms occasionally develop within Saturn's atmosphere. Some can grow to enormous sizes, stretching across thousands of miles. Yet even these storms unfold over long periods and often appear as bright white regions against the golden background. Unlike the violent thunderstorms familiar on Earth, Saturn's giant storms are observed from such immense distances that they seem almost serene in photographs. Their slow development and gradual evolution reflect the leisurely pace that characterizes so much of the planet. One particularly remarkable phenomenon occurs roughly once every Saturnian year. Giant disturbances known as great white spots appear in the atmosphere. These enormous storms can encircle the entire planet and persist for months. Historical records show that such events have been observed for centuries. Even though they are immense by earthly standards, they remain part of Saturn's natural rhythms, appearing only after decades of quiet and then slowly fading away. Lightning also exists within Saturn's clouds. Instruments aboard spacecraft have detected powerful electrical discharges deep within the atmosphere. Some lightning flashes on Saturn are far more energetic than those on Earth. Yet because they occur beneath thick layers of cloud, they are hidden from ordinary view. Their presence reminds us that beneath Saturn's peaceful appearance lies a dynamic and active world. Temperatures vary throughout the atmosphere. The uppermost clouds are extraordinarily cold, with temperatures approaching -280 degrees Fahrenheit. Deeper layers become progressively warmer. Far below the visible clouds, temperatures rise dramatically due to the immense pressure within the planet. Saturn also generates more heat than it receives from the Sun, slowly releasing energy left over from its formation. The giant planet shines with a faint warmth of its own. Rain on Saturn would be unlike anything experienced on Earth. In certain layers of the atmosphere, ammonia can condense and fall as precipitation. Deeper still, under enormous pressures, entirely unfamiliar forms of weather may occur. Scientists believe that exotic conditions exist where substances behave in ways impossible to observe naturally on our own planet. Saturn's atmosphere contains mysteries that continue to inspire curiosity and wonder. From a distance, however, none of this complexity is immediately apparent. Saturn presents a face of quiet beauty. The cloud bands flow gently around the planet. The rings cast graceful shadows. Sunlight softly illuminates the pale atmosphere. Even the storms seem to unfold with patience rather than urgency. There is a sense of balance and continuity that makes Saturn feel almost timeless. If one could observe the ringed giant over many years, subtle changes would become visible. Clouds would shift. Bright regions would appear and fade. Seasonal lighting would alter the appearance of the rings and atmosphere. Yet these transformations would occur slowly, measured in years and decades rather than hours and days. Saturn teaches that weather does not always have to be sudden or dramatic. Sometimes it can be a gradual dance unfolding beneath distant sunlight. In the quiet reaches beyond Jupiter, the ringed giant continues to turn beneath the faint glow of the sun. Winds race, clouds drift, and hidden storms rise and fade, all while the planet maintains its elegant appearance. Wrapped in soft colors and illuminated by gentle daylight, Saturn remains one of the most peaceful and beautiful worlds in the solar system, a place where even weather seems to move with patience and grace. Among all the sights found in the solar system, few are as graceful and memorable as the rings of Saturn. They have become the symbol of the planet itself. So familiar that many people imagine Saturn first and its rings second, as though the two have always belonged together in human imagination. Yet for countless generations, people looked at Saturn without knowing that the rings existed at all. To the naked eye, the giant planet appears as a small golden light, giving no hint that one of the most elegant structures in the universe surrounds it. The rings are enormous in width. Stretching outward for hundreds of thousands of miles, they form a vast disk encircling the planet. If they could somehow be placed around Earth, they would extend far beyond the distance to the moon. Yet despite this tremendous size, the rings are surprisingly thin. In many regions, they are only a few dozen feet thick. This contrast between their immense width and delicate thickness gives them an almost fragile appearance, as though they were carefully crafted rather than shaped by nature. From a distance, the rings seem solid and continuous. In reality, they are made up of countless pieces of ice and rock. Some particles are no larger than grains of dust, while others are the size of houses, mountains, or even small moons. Each piece follows its own orbit around Saturn, moving according to the same laws of gravity that guide the planets around the Sun. Together, these countless particles create the appearance of smooth and shining bands suspended in space. The material composing the rings reflects sunlight exceptionally well. Much of it consists of water ice, which gives the rings their bright and almost luminous appearance. When sunlight strikes these icy particles, it is scattered in beautiful ways, creating subtle shades of white, silver, and pale gold. Seen through telescopes or in photographs captured by spacecraft, the rings often appear almost unreal, like something painted by an artist rather than formed through billions of years of cosmic history. The rings are divided into several major sections, each separated by darker gaps. Astronomers have given these regions names such as the A ring, B ring, and C ring. Although the naming system may seem unusual, it reflects the order in which the rings were identified, rather than their distance from Saturn. Between some of these regions lie spaces where the number of particles becomes much lower, creating dark divisions that add even more beauty to the overall structure. One of the most famous of these gaps is known as the Cassini division, named after the astronomer Giovanni Cassini, who studied Saturn centuries ago. This dark region separates two of the brightest rings from Earth. Even relatively modest telescopes can reveal this division under favorable conditions. Amateur astronomers around the world often remember the excitement of seeing the Cassini division for the first time, realizing that the rings are not simply a single band, but a wonderfully detailed system. As Saturn moves around the Sun, the appearance of the rings changes. Sometimes they are tilted toward Earth, revealing their full beauty. During these periods, they seem wide and spectacular, stretching gracefully away from the planet. At other times, the rings become nearly edge-on from our perspective. Because they are so thin, they can almost disappear entirely. For a brief period, Saturn appears strangely different, only to slowly reveal its familiar elegance once again as the years pass. The shadows cast by the rings create some of the most beautiful scenes in the solar system. Depending on the season, the rings project delicate bands of darkness across Saturn's cloud tops. At the same time, the planet itself casts shadows upon the rings. These shifting patterns of light and shade change slowly over the course of many years, producing views that seem calm and almost poetic. Spacecraft images have captured these scenes in extraordinary detail, revealing a level of beauty that astonished even the scientists who expected remarkable sights. The rings are not silent in a scientific sense. Every particle moves continuously, orbiting Saturn at speeds of thousands of miles per hour. Yet because space itself is nearly empty, there is no air to carry sound. If someone could somehow observe the rings nearby, they would witness endless motion in complete silence. Countless icy fragments would circle the planet in perfect obedience to gravity, creating one of the most peaceful spectacles imaginable. Many people think of the rings as permanent features that will last forever. In reality, they are constantly changing. Tiny particles are lost over time, and gravitational interactions slowly reshape the structure. Yet these changes occur so gradually that the rings appear timeless on human scales. Entire civilizations have risen and fallen while Saturn's rings remained nearly unchanged in the sky. The Voyager spacecraft in the early 1980s provided humanity with breathtaking images of the rings. Later, the Cassini mission transformed our understanding even further. Thousands of photographs revealed astonishing details, delicate waves, narrow ringlets, and structures shaped by Saturn's moons. What had once appeared simple and smooth turned out to possess incredible complexity. Yet despite all these discoveries, the overall impression remained one of elegance and tranquility. Perhaps that is what makes Saturn's rings so captivating. They combine vastness with delicacy, motion with silence, and complexity with harmony. Nothing about them feels hurried. Billions of particles travel endlessly around the giant planet, following paths established long before human beings first looked toward the stars. Their graceful dance continues day after day, century after century, beneath the faint sunlight of the outer solar system. In the immense darkness beyond Earth, Saturn carries these shining companions with quiet dignity. The rings do not roar or blaze. They simply exist, reflecting sunlight and tracing elegant circles around the golden planet. They are among the most peaceful sights nature has ever created, a reminder that beauty can arise from countless small things moving together in perfect balance across the endless silence of space. For thousands of years, human beings looked at Saturn without realizing that it possessed rings. To the naked eye, the planet appeared as a bright and steady point of light, no different in shape from the stars surrounding it. Ancient civilizations carefully tracked its slow movement across the heavens, assigning names and meanings to the wandering object. Yet none could imagine the extraordinary structure hidden around the distant world. The rings remained invisible, patiently waiting for humanity to develop the tools necessary to reveal them. Everything began to change during the early 17th century. A remarkable invention, the telescope, opened a completely new window onto the universe. For the first time, people could see mountains on the moon, moons around Jupiter, and details that had remained hidden since the beginning of human history. Among the pioneers of this new age was the Italian astronomer Galileo Galilei. In 1610, he turned his telescope towards Saturn and immediately encountered something puzzling. Galileo's telescope was revolutionary for its time, but by modern standards it was extremely simple. The instrument could magnify objects only modestly, and its images lacked the sharpness available today. When Galileo observed Saturn, he noticed that the planet did not appear perfectly round. Instead, strange shapes seemed to protrude from either side. To him, it almost looked as though Saturn had two companions attached to its body. Confused by what he saw, Galileo described Saturn as having ears. At one point, he compared the appearance to three bodies touching one another, with a large sphere in the middle and smaller objects on each side. He had unknowingly become the first person in history to observe Saturn's rings. Yet the true nature of the phenomenon remained hidden from him. His telescope simply lacked the power needed to resolve the delicate structure. Years later, something even stranger happened. When Galileo pointed his telescope towards Saturn again, the mysterious companions seemed to have vanished. The planet appeared alone. He was astonished and deeply puzzled. Had Saturn somehow changed its shape? Had the smaller bodies disappeared? The answer, unknown to Galileo, lay in the changing angle of the rings. Because they are extremely thin, there are periods when they become nearly edge-on from Earth's perspective and almost vanish from view. The mystery remained unsolved until the Dutch astronomer Christian Huygens entered the story. Using improved telescopes in the mid-17th century, Huygens studied Saturn carefully and reached a remarkable conclusion. In 1655, he proposed that Saturn was surrounded by a thin, flat ring that did not touch the planet. This idea explained the strange observations that had confused Galileo. It also revealed that Saturn was unlike any other world known at the time. Huygens described the ring as a structure inclined relative to the planet. As Saturn moved around the Sun and Earth changed position, observers would see the ring from different angles. Sometimes it would appear wide and obvious. At other times, it would become so thin that it nearly disappeared. This elegant explanation transformed one of astronomy's greatest mysteries into one of its most beautiful discoveries. Not long afterward, another important figure entered the history of Saturn. Giovanni Cassini, an Italian astronomer who later worked in France, devoted much of his career to studying the giant planet. Through careful observation, he noticed that the ring was not a single continuous structure. Instead, it contained a dark gap dividing the brighter regions. This feature became known as the Cassini division, a name it still carries centuries later. As telescopes improved throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, astronomers gradually uncovered more details. They realized that Saturn's ring system was far more complex than originally imagined. Additional rings became visible, and subtle variations in brightness revealed structures hidden within the larger bands. Artists carefully sketched these observations, producing beautiful drawings long before photography became common. By the late 19th century, scientists had begun to understand that the rings were probably composed of countless small particles rather than a solid disk. This idea was supported by mathematical studies showing that a solid ring would be unstable. Instead, the rings had to consist of innumerable fragments orbiting Saturn independently. It was an astonishing realization. Something that appeared smooth and continuous from Earth was actually made of countless separate pieces moving together in harmony. The arrival of photography allowed astronomers to capture Saturn in greater detail. Images preserved subtle features that the human eye might overlook. Observatories around the world devoted increasing attention to the ringed planet, and each generation built upon the discoveries of those before it. Yet even the finest telescopes on Earth could reveal only part of the story. The 20th century brought space exploration, and with it came a new era of discovery. The Pioneer and Voyager spacecraft provided humanity with its first close views of Saturn's rings. Scientists expected beauty, but they were astonished by the complexity they found. Instead of simple bands, the rings contained thousands of narrow structures, delicate waves, and patterns shaped by the gravitational influence of moons. Later, the Cassini spacecraft transformed our understanding even further. Orbiting Saturn for more than 13 years, it captured some of the most breathtaking images ever taken. These photographs revealed details unimaginable to Galileo and Huygens. Tiny ringlets, intricate textures, and constantly changing structures emerged from the darkness. Yet, despite all this complexity, the rings retained the same elegance that had fascinated observers for centuries. There is something peaceful about the history of their discovery. No single moment revealed all the answers. Understanding came slowly, through patience, curiosity, and generations of careful observation. One astronomer passed knowledge to another, century after century, each contributing a small piece to the larger picture. From Galileo's first puzzled glimpse to the detailed images returned by distant spacecraft, the story of Saturn's rings is not one of sudden revelation, but of gradual understanding. The rings themselves changed little during this time. They simply continued their silent journey around the giant planet, waiting patiently while humanity learned to see them more clearly. And so, in the quiet darkness beyond Earth, Saturn and its rings remain much as they were when the first telescope was raised toward the sky. They continue to shine softly beneath the distant sun, reminding us that some of the greatest discoveries arrive not in moments of noise or excitement, but through patience, wonder, and the gentle passage of time. Saturn's rings look smooth and continuous when seen from a distance, but they are built from an immense collection of tiny individual pieces. Each fragment, whether it is as small as a grain of dust or as large as a mountain, follows its own path around the planet. Together, these countless pieces form one of the most elegant structures in the solar system. Most of the material is made of water ice, mixed with traces of dust and rocky particles, creating a shining system that reflects sunlight like a vast frozen ocean suspended in space. Water ice is the main reason the rings appear so bright. Pure ice reflects sunlight extremely well, especially in the cold outer regions of the solar system where Saturn resides. These icy particles act like tiny mirrors, scattering light in all directions. When sunlight reaches the rings, it bounces off countless fragments, producing the soft white and pale golden glow that can be seen even from Earth through a telescope. Without this ice, the rings would appear much darker and far less noticeable. The particles within the rings are not evenly distributed. Instead, they are organized into distinct regions with varying densities. Some areas are thick and bright, filled with a large number of icy fragments. Other regions are thin and almost transparent, where particles are spread far apart. These variations create the banded structure that gives the rings their layered appearance. From a distance, these differences blend together into graceful arcs, but up close they reveal a surprisingly complex environment. Although water ice dominates the composition, dust also plays an important role. This dust is often the result of collisions between larger, icy bodies. When fragments strike one another, tiny pieces break off and spread throughout the ring system. Over long periods of time, this constant cycle of collisions and fragmentation helps maintain a fine balance of particle sizes within the rings. Even the smallest grain contributes to the overall structure, participating in the endless motion around Saturn. The particles in the rings are constantly moving. Each one follows its own orbit, guided by Saturn's powerful gravity. These orbits are not random. They are carefully balanced paths shaped by the combined influence of the planet and its moons. Some particles travel faster, while others move more slowly depending on their distance from Saturn. Together, they create a dynamic system that looks calm from afar, but is always in motion. Despite this movement, the rings are incredibly thin compared with their width. In many places, the vertical thickness of the rings is only a few tens of meters. To imagine this, one might think of a massive disk stretching across hundreds of thousands of miles, but as thin as a sheet of paper in comparison. This extreme thinness is why the rings can nearly disappear when viewed edge-on from Earth. There is simply very little vertical material to reflect light in that orientation. Over time, the particles within the rings undergo countless collisions. These interactions are gentle compared with violent impacts seen elsewhere in the solar system, but they are still significant on a microscopic scale. Each collision slightly changes the motion of the particles involved, gradually shaping the structure of the rings. In this way, the rings are not static. They are continuously evolving, even if the changes occur too slowly to notice in a single lifetime. Some particles are temporarily captured by Saturn's moons. When a small icy fragment drifts too close to a moon, gravity can alter its path, pulling it into a new orbit or ejecting it from the ring system entirely. This constant exchange between rings and moons creates a delicate balance. The moons act as both sculptors and guardians of the ring structure. shaping gaps and maintaining sharp edges within certain regions. One of the most fascinating aspects of the rings is how different they are from anything on Earth. There is no atmosphere to slow the particles down. There is no friction in the traditional sense. Instead, motion is governed almost entirely by gravity and gentle collisions. This creates an environment where time itself seems to move differently, measured in slow orbital changes rather than sudden events. Scientists believe that the rings may not be as ancient as Saturn itself. Some evidence suggests that they could be relatively young in astronomical terms, possibly formed from the breakup of a moon or a comet that wandered too close to the planet. If this is true, the rings are a temporary feature in Saturn's long history. They exist in a delicate balance that will eventually change over millions of years. Even so, during the time humans have observed them, the rings have appeared constant and unchanging. Ancient astronomers saw Saturn as a simple point of light. Early telescopes revealed the first hints of its structure. Modern spacecraft showed the breathtaking complexity hidden within. Yet throughout all this progress, the fundamental nature of the rings as icy, dusty fragments in motion has remained the same. There is something calming about imagining this vast system of particles quietly orbiting a distant planet. Each fragment follows its path with patience. There is no rush, no collision of worlds, only gentle interactions and endless motion under the influence of gravity. The rings are not frozen in place, but they move with such harmony that they appear almost still from far away. In the quiet darkness beyond the orbit of Jupiter, Saturn continues to carry its shimmering rings through space. Built from ice and dust, shaped by gravity and time, they reflect sunlight in soft patterns that have captivated observers for centuries. They are both fragile and vast, simple in composition yet complex in behavior, and together they form one of the most peaceful and beautiful structures ever discovered in the universe. Saturn holds a special place in human imagination that goes beyond its physical reality. Even people who are not interested in astronomy often recognize it instantly and associate it with calmness, distance, and beauty. Part of this comes from its appearance, but part of it also comes from the way Saturn feels in the mind, as something both real and slightly unreal at the same time. It exists far away, beyond the reach of ordinary experience, yet it feels strangely familiar through images, stories, and long human curiosity about the night sky. One of the reasons Saturn feels so symbolic is its simplicity at first glance. When seen from Earth without a telescope, it is just a small point of light moving slowly among the stars. It does not flash or change color dramatically. It does not move quickly like nearby objects such as airplanes or satellites. Instead, it drifts gently across the sky with a quiet consistency. This slow motion creates a sense of patience and stability that naturally invites reflection. When telescopes reveal Saturn's rings, the emotional impression deepens. The planet transforms from a simple point into a structured and elegant world. The sudden appearance of rings feels almost unexpected, as if nature has quietly added decoration to a distant object. This contrast between simplicity and revealed complexity is part of what makes Saturn so memorable. It is not overwhelming. It does not demand attention. It simply becomes more interesting the closer one looks. In human culture, Saturn has often been associated with time. Ancient observers noticed its slow movement and connected it with age, endurance, and long cycles. This association remained through history and influenced symbolic interpretations in art, philosophy, and early science. Even today, the idea of Saturn carries a sense of long duration, as if the planet itself moves according to a rhythm older than human life. There is also something visually balanced about Saturn that contributes to its peaceful image. The planet itself is smooth and softly colored, while the rings form a thin, elegant line around it. Together, They create a simple and harmonious shape that is easy for the human mind to recognize and remember. Unlike more chaotic planetary environments filled with storms or dramatic color changes, Saturn presents an image of order and calm structure. Distance also plays an important role in how Saturn is perceived. It is far enough away that it feels untouched and remote, yet close enough in astronomical terms to be seen and studied. This balance between accessibility and separation gives Saturn a unique psychological position. It feels reachable through imagination but not through physical experience. That distance allows it to become a kind of mental space where people can project ideas of peace and wonder. The rings themselves contribute strongly to this imaginative quality. They do not resemble anything common on Earth. There is no direct equivalent in daily life to a planet surrounded by a vast, thin disk of ice particles. Because of this, the rings feel almost abstract. They are real, but they also resemble something artistic or conceptual, like a structure designed to represent beauty rather than function. Saturn's color also supports this impression. The soft golden tones are gentle on the eyes. They do not create strong emotional tension or urgency. Instead, they resemble warm light filtered through thin clouds. This visual softness helps Saturn stand apart from more intense planetary images that feature sharp contrasts or violent atmospheric activity. Another reason Saturn remains in popular imagination is the way it is presented in modern media. Spacecraft images, telescope photographs, and scientific visualizations have shown the planet in extraordinary detail. Yet even in high resolution, Saturn does not lose its calm identity. The more detail that is revealed, the more structured and elegant it appears. This consistency between expectation and discovery reinforces its peaceful reputation. There is also a sense of timelessness connected to Saturn. It has existed in nearly the same form for billions of years, long before human civilization appeared on Earth. It will continue to exist long after current cultures have changed or disappeared. This long continuity gives it a symbolic weight. It becomes a reminder that some structures in the universe operate on scales far beyond human experience. Saturn's position in the outer solar system adds to this feeling. It is not part of the inner region, where Earth, Mars, and Venus orbit more closely to the Sun. Instead, it belongs to a quieter and more distant zone, where sunlight is weaker and motion feels slower. This separation from the inner planets enhances its identity as a calm, outer presence in the planetary family. Even its moons contribute to this perception. Many of them are icy, quiet, and distant worlds in their own right. Together they form a system that feels organized, yet serene, as if Saturn is surrounded by companions that move in coordinated silence. This adds depth to the image of Saturn as not just a planet, but a whole environment of gentle motion. In the end, Saturn floats in human imagination because it combines simplicity, beauty, distance, and time in a way that feels naturally calming. It is large and complex in reality, yet it presents itself in a form that the mind can easily hold without tension. It does not overwhelm with detail. Instead, it offers a steady image that invites quiet observation. And so, even without knowing its science, people continue to recognize Saturn as something special. A golden world surrounded by delicate rings, slowly moving through space, remaining unchanged across generations, and existing far enough away to feel like a peaceful thought suspended in the darkness of the sky. Saturn's atmosphere carries colors that feel unusually gentle compared to many other worlds in the solar system. Instead of harsh contrasts or intense tones, the planet presents a palette of soft yellows, pale golds, muted creams, and faint browns. These colors are not static or painted in fixed patterns. They are constantly shaped by light, depth, and motion within the atmosphere. Yet they blend in a way that creates a calm and unified appearance from a distance. The upper layers of Saturn's atmosphere are mostly hydrogen and helium, but trace gases influence how sunlight is absorbed and scattered. Ammonia crystals, methane molecules, and other compounds interact with incoming light in subtle ways. When sunlight passes through these layers, certain wavelengths are reflected more strongly than others. This filtering effect produces the warm golden tones that define Saturn's visual identity. Unlike Earth, where land and oceans create sharp visual boundaries, Saturn has no solid surface to interrupt its atmosphere. As a result, colors appear as gradual transitions rather than defined regions. Cloud bands merge into one another gently, creating a sense of continuous flow around the planet. Even when viewed through powerful telescopes, these transitions remain soft, giving Saturn an almost calming uniformity. The uppermost clouds form the visible layer of Saturn's atmosphere. These clouds are composed primarily of ammonia ice crystals, which reflect sunlight efficiently. This reflection gives the planet its bright, slightly creamy appearance. Beneath this layer, deeper clouds exist, but are hidden from direct view. These lower regions may contain ammonium hydrosulfide and water clouds, each forming at different depths depending on temperature and pressure conditions. Because Saturn is so far from the Sun, the overall illumination is weak compared to Earth. This low level of sunlight contributes to the softness of its colors. Shadows are not sharply defined, and brightness changes gradually across the atmosphere. This gentle lighting effect makes the entire planet appear as though it is wrapped in a thin veil of light rather than exposed to direct, intense illumination. The planet's rapid rotation also influences its cloud patterns. Saturn completes one rotation in about 10.5 hours, causing atmospheric bands to stretch around the entire globe. These bands are not rigid structures but flowing currents of gas moving at different speeds. Some regions drift slightly faster or slower than others, creating faint horizontal streaks across the planet's surface. However, these differences are subtle, resulting in a smooth and balanced appearance. Storm activity exists within these clouds, but it does not dominate Saturn's visual character. Instead of sharp and chaotic structures, storms often appear as bright or slightly darker patches within the broader cloud system. These features can grow large, sometimes spanning thousands of miles, yet they remain embedded within the soft background of the atmosphere. Even powerful storms on Saturn tend to blend into the overall calmness of its appearance when seen from afar. One of the most fascinating aspects of Saturn's color structure is how it changes with viewing angle and seasonal lighting. As Saturn moves along its long orbit around the Sun, different hemispheres receive varying amounts of sunlight. This subtle shift influences the brightness and tone of cloud regions. Over time, one hemisphere may appear slightly warmer in color, while the other takes on a cooler, more muted appearance. These changes occur so slowly that they are almost imperceptible on short time scales. Occasionally, darker bands become more visible due to deeper atmospheric circulation patterns. These regions are not sharply defined, but appear as gentle shading differences within the cloud layers. They add depth to the planet without disrupting its overall sense of visual calm. The result is a surface that feels layered rather than flat, but still unified in tone and expression. From space, Saturn's color palette seems intentionally restrained. There are no extreme reds, blues, or greens dominating the view. Instead, everything remains within a narrow range of warm and neutral tones. This restraint contributes strongly to the emotional impression Saturn creates. It feels balanced, steady, and almost meditative in its appearance. Even spacecraft images that reveal incredible detail preserve this softness. The Cassini mission, which orbited Saturn for many years, captured cloud structures with remarkable clarity. Yet, despite the resolution, the colors never became harsh or overwhelming. Instead, They reinforce the idea of a planet wrapped in gentle atmospheric layers that shift slowly and gracefully over time. Light scattering within Saturn's atmosphere also plays an important role. Tiny particles suspended in the clouds scatter sunlight in multiple directions, diffusing brightness and softening contrasts. This scattering effect reduces sharp edges and helps maintain the planet's characteristic smooth appearance. It is one of the reasons why Saturn looks less visually aggressive than planets like Jupiter, which display more dramatic atmospheric turbulence. The overall effect of these processes is a planet that appears visually quiet. Even though Saturn is dynamic and energetic beneath its cloud tops, the way light interacts with its atmosphere transforms that energy into something visually soft. Instead of presenting chaos, Saturn presents harmony. Instead of sharp contrasts, it offers gradients. Instead of intense coloration, it provides subtle tones that shift gently across its surface. In the end, Saturn's clouds create more than just a physical atmosphere. They form a visual experience that feels naturally calming to observe. The soft colors, gradual transitions, and gentle lighting combine into an appearance that seems almost designed for quiet contemplation. It is a world where even light behaves gently, shaping a giant planet that looks as peaceful as it is distant. Saturn may look calm and still from a distant view, but its atmosphere is anything but motionless. Beneath the soft golden clouds, powerful winds circle the planet at extraordinary speeds. These winds move in broad bands that wrap around Saturn like invisible highways of gas, carrying storms, clouds, and energy across a world with no solid ground to slow them down. Even though this activity is intense, it blends into a smooth visual pattern, giving Saturn its peaceful and balanced appearance. One of the most remarkable features of Saturn's atmosphere is the speed of its winds. Near the equator, winds can reach over 1,000 miles per hour. This is far faster than most winds on Earth. Yet on Saturn, they appear as part of a stable and organized system. The reason for this balance lies in the planet's structure. With no continents, oceans, or mountains to disrupt flow, the atmosphere can move freely around the globe, forming continuous bands that remain stable over long periods of time. These bands are created by differences in rotation speed at different latitudes. Some regions of Saturn's atmosphere rotate slightly faster than others, and this creates alternating zones of motion. The result is a striped appearance. Although the stripes are soft and subtle compared to those on Jupiter, instead of sharp boundaries, Saturn's bands blend gently into one another, maintaining the planet's overall calm visual identity. Storms do form within this system, but they behave differently from storms on Earth. A Saturnian storm can grow to enormous sizes, sometimes spanning thousands of miles. Yet, even these massive systems tend to evolve slowly. They may last for weeks, months, or even longer, gradually shifting shape as they interact with surrounding winds. From a distance, they appear as bright or slightly darker patches drifting within the broader atmosphere. One of the most famous types of storm on Saturn is the Great White Spot. These rare events occur roughly once every Saturn year, which means they can appear only every few decades. When they form, they can expand rapidly, eventually wrapping around a large portion of the planet. Despite their size, they remain part of Saturn's natural atmospheric cycle, emerging and fading in a rhythm that unfolds over long periods of time. Lightning has also been detected within Saturn's clouds. These electrical discharges are powerful, sometimes far stronger than lightning on Earth. However, they occur deep within the atmosphere, hidden beneath thick cloud layers. Spacecraft instruments can detect their radio signals, but they are rarely visible directly. This hidden electrical activity adds another layer of complexity to Saturn's weather, even though it remains invisible to casual observation. The energy driving Saturn's weather comes from two main sources. One is sunlight, which is weak but still influences the upper atmosphere. The other is internal heat rising from within the planet itself. Saturn emits more energy than it receives from the Sun, meaning it slowly releases leftover heat from its formation. This internal energy helps power atmospheric movement and keeps the winds in motion even at great distances from the Sun. Because Saturn rotates so quickly, completing a full rotation in about 10.5 hours, the Coriolis effect strongly influences atmospheric motion. This effect causes moving air to curve rather than travel in straight lines, shaping the planet's distinctive banded structure. The combination of fast rotation and free-flowing gas creates a stable yet dynamic system that persists over long timescales. Despite the strength of these winds and storms, Saturn does not appear chaotic when observed from space. This is one of its most fascinating qualities. The immense energy within the atmosphere is distributed across such a large scale that it creates harmony rather than disorder. Patterns emerge that are wide, smooth, and continuous, giving the impression of a planet that is active but controlled. Seasonal changes also influence Saturn's atmospheric behavior. As the planet slowly moves along its long orbit around the Sun, sunlight shifts between hemispheres. This gradual change affects temperature differences, which in turn influence wind patterns and storm activity. However, these changes occur so slowly that they unfold over many years, reinforcing the sense of patience that defines Saturn's environment. Some storms rise and fade without leaving lasting traces, while others reshape cloud structures for extended periods. Over time, the atmosphere continuously renews itself, yet it maintains a familiar overall appearance. This balance between change and stability is part of what makes Saturn visually soothing. It is a place where motion never becomes overwhelming. Even the most extreme weather events on Saturn are softened by distance. From Earth or from orbit, the planet always appears as a smooth sphere of layered colors. The violent forces within are transformed into gentle patterns when viewed from afar. This transformation of energy into visual calm is one of Saturn's most striking qualities. In the end, Saturn's winds and storms reveal a hidden world of motion beneath a quiet surface. It is a planet of constant movement, yet that movement is distributed so evenly that it creates beauty rather than disturbance. Beneath its golden clouds, Saturn breathes with powerful winds and long-lasting storms. Yet from a distance it remains one of the most peaceful sights in the solar system, a giant world where even the strongest forces flow in graceful rhythm. Far above Saturn's cloud tops, near the northern pole of the giant planet, there exists one of the most unusual and fascinating structures in the entire solar system. Unlike ordinary storms or cloud bands, this feature has a shape that seems almost impossible at first glance. It is a gigantic hexagon, a six-sided pattern so enormous that several Earths could fit inside it. Stretching across roughly 20,000 miles, this remarkable structure is larger than our entire planet and has remained stable for decades of observation. In a universe filled with spirals, circles, and irregular forms, Saturn quietly presents a shape that looks almost carefully drawn. The existence of the hexagon was first discovered in the early 1980s by the Voyager spacecraft. As these robotic explorers passed Saturn, they captured images of the northern polar region and revealed something unexpected. Scientists noticed that the clouds surrounding the pole formed a nearly perfect six-sided pattern. At first, the discovery seemed almost unbelievable. Nature does not often create shapes that resemble simple geometric figures so clearly. Yet the images were unmistakable. Saturn possessed a hexagon. For many years, this mysterious feature remained difficult to study. When the Voyager missions completed their flybys, Saturn's northern hemisphere was entering a long period of darkness associated with the planet's seasons. since each Saturnian season lasts more than 7 Earth years. The North Pole remained hidden in shadow for a long time. It was not until the arrival of the Cassini spacecraft that detailed observations became possible once again. As sunlight gradually returned to the northern hemisphere, Cassini began capturing extraordinary images of the hexagon. Scientists found that the structure had not disappeared. In fact, it had remained remarkably stable. Decades after Voyager first discovered it, the six-sided pattern still surrounded the North Pole, quietly maintaining its shape while the rest of the atmosphere continued its endless motion. The hexagon itself is not a solid object. It is a pattern formed by winds and cloud movements in Saturn's atmosphere. Powerful jet streams circle the North Pole at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. Somehow, the interaction of these winds creates a stable wave pattern with 6 distinct sides. Unlike ordinary storms that change shape over time, the hexagon preserves its geometry with astonishing consistency. Inside the hexagon lies another fascinating feature. At the very center of the North Pole exists a massive cyclone. This swirling storm resembles hurricanes on Earth in certain ways, but it is far larger. Clouds spiral around the center, and a calm eye can be observed in the middle of the system. Yet, despite the presence of this powerful cyclone, the hexagonal boundary surrounding it remains intact, creating one of the most extraordinary atmospheric structures known. Scientists have performed experiments and computer simulations to understand how such a shape can exist. Surprisingly, rotating fluids under certain conditions can naturally produce polygonal patterns. In laboratory experiments on Earth, researchers have recreated similar shapes using spinning liquids. These demonstrations suggest that Saturn's hexagon is not a strange accident, but a natural consequence of the physics governing fluid motion. Even so, seeing such a perfect geometric pattern on a planet remains deeply impressive. One of the most remarkable aspects of the hexagon is its longevity. Storms on Earth may last days or weeks. Some weather systems on Jupiter persist for centuries. Saturn's hexagon, however, has remained visible for at least several decades, and it may have existed much longer. Ancient astronomers could not see it because their telescopes lacked sufficient power, but the structure itself may have been quietly circling the North Pole for hundreds or even thousands of years. The colors within the hexagon also change with the seasons. During the long winter darkness, the region appears relatively subdued. As sunlight returns, chemical reactions in the atmosphere produce subtle changes in color. The polar region gradually develops richer shades and more visible cloud structures. These transformations unfold slowly over many years, reflecting the patient rhythm that characterizes Saturn itself. The southern pole of Saturn contains its own impressive cyclone, but it does not possess a hexagon. This difference adds another layer of mystery. Why does one pole display such a remarkable shape while the other does not? Scientists continue to investigate this question, using observations and models to deepen their understanding of the giant planet's atmosphere. From a distance, the hexagon is invisible to the naked eye. Even powerful telescopes reveal only hints of its presence. Yet knowing that such a structure exists adds to the sense of wonder surrounding Saturn. Hidden within the soft golden clouds lies a gigantic geometric pattern quietly turning with the planet, a feature unlike anything found elsewhere in the solar system. There is something peaceful about the hexagon despite its immense size. It does not erupt violently or transform unpredictably. Instead, it remains steady and balanced, following the same rhythms that govern the rest of Saturn. The winds flow continuously, the clouds drift gracefully, and the six-sided boundary quietly endures year after year. In a world where so much seems chaotic, Saturn's hexagon offers an image of order emerging naturally from motion. Perhaps that is one reason this strange structure captures the imagination. It reminds us that nature is capable of creating patterns that seem almost artistic, without intention or design. The laws of physics have shaped a feature that appears both beautiful and mysterious. Deep within the northern atmosphere of Saturn, a vast six-sided wave continues its endless journey around the pole, hidden beneath distant sunlight and surrounded by the silent darkness of space. And so the ring giant reveals yet another layer of quiet wonder. Beyond its graceful rings and golden clouds, Saturn carries a giant hexagon at its crown, a geometric treasure that has persisted through decades of observation, and perhaps through ages far beyond human memory, patiently turning beneath the faint and gentle light of the distant sun. Invisible to the eye and silent in the vacuum of space, Saturn is surrounded by an enormous magnetic environment that extends far beyond the planet itself. This invisible region, known as the magnetosphere, is one of the largest structures associated with Saturn. While the rings are bright and beautiful, and the clouds are soft and golden, the magnetic field remains hidden from ordinary view. Yet it quietly surrounds the giant planet, shaping the movement of charged particles and creating a vast protective bubble that travels with Saturn on its endless journey around the sun. Magnetic fields are produced by motion deep inside planets. In Saturn's case, scientists believe that the source lies far beneath the visible atmosphere, where hydrogen exists in a strange metallic form. Under immense pressure, this unusual material can conduct electricity. As Saturn rotates rapidly, completing one turn in about 10.5 hours, electrical currents are generated deep within the planet. These currents create the magnetic field that extends outward into space. Although invisible, Saturn's magnetic field is immense. On the side facing the sun, the magnetosphere stretches millions of miles into space. On the opposite side, it extends much farther, forming a long tail that trails behind the planet. This structure is constantly shaped by the solar wind, a stream of particles flowing outward from the sun. As the solar wind encounters Saturn's magnetic field, it is deflected and guided around the planet, creating a dynamic but balanced environment. Compared with Earth, Saturn's magnetic field is remarkably symmetrical. Most planetary magnetic fields are slightly tilted relative to their rotation axes. Earth's magnetic poles, for example, are not perfectly aligned with its geographic poles. Saturn is unusual because its magnetic field is almost perfectly aligned with its axis of rotation. This near-perfect alignment puzzled scientists for many years, and understanding the reason remains an active area of research. Within Saturn's magnetosphere, countless charged particles move along invisible magnetic pathways. Some originate from the solar wind, while others come from Saturn's moons and rings. These particles become trapped by the magnetic field and form regions of energetic radiation surrounding the planet. Despite the presence of this activity, the entire system operates with extraordinary regularity, following the quiet laws of physics that govern the universe. One of the most beautiful consequences of Saturn's magnetic field is the appearance of auroras near the poles. Similar to the northern and southern lights on Earth, Saturn's auroras are created when charged particles interact with gases in the upper atmosphere. These particles release energy in the form of light, producing glowing regions around the polar areas. Spacecraft observations have revealed spectacular ultraviolet auroras encircling Saturn's poles, though they would appear different from the colorful displays familiar on Earth. Because Saturn's atmosphere is composed mainly of hydrogen, its auroras possess characteristics unlike those of our own planet. They are vast and dynamic, sometimes changing shape in response to variations in the solar wind. Yet these changes occur within an overall system that remains stable and predictable. The auroras brighten and fade, responding to conditions in space while maintaining the graceful rhythms of Saturn's environment. Saturn's moons also interact with the magnetic field. Enceladus, one of the most fascinating moons in the solar system, releases jets of water vapor and ice particles into space. These particles become ionized and contribute material to Saturn's magnetosphere. In this way, the The moon and the planet are connected through invisible streams of matter and energy. The relationship is subtle and continuous, demonstrating how the members of the Saturn system influence one another. The rings themselves participate in this magnetic environment as well. Tiny particles from the rings can become electrically charged and interact with the surrounding field. Although these effects are difficult to observe directly, they reveal that Saturn's rings are not isolated structures. Instead, they are part of a larger and interconnected system extending far beyond a visible planet. During its long mission, the Cassini spacecraft provided scientists with an extraordinary opportunity to study Saturn's magnetic environment. Instruments aboard the spacecraft measured magnetic fields, detected charged particles, and observed how the magnetosphere changed over time. These measurements revealed a complex and dynamic system, yet one characterized by remarkable balance. Despite constant interactions with the solar wind and the contributions from Saturn's moons, the magnetosphere maintained its overall structure with quiet persistence. If human eyes could somehow perceive magnetic fields, Saturn would appear even more extraordinary than it already does. Beyond the rings and clouds, vast invisible arcs and regions would surround the planet, extending millions of miles into space. Streams of charged particles would trace elegant paths around the giant world, and glowing auroras would dance above the poles. What appears empty and silent to ordinary vision would reveal itself as a realm of hidden motion and delicate interactions. There is something deeply calming about this invisible environment. It operates continuously without drawing attention to itself. No sound announces its presence. No bright colors reveal its full extent. Yet, day after day, century after century, Saturn's magnetic field quietly performs its role, guiding particles and shaping the space around the planet. It is a reminder that some of the most important structures in the universe are those we cannot see directly. Long before the first telescopes were built, Saturn's magnetosphere already surrounded the giant planet. Long after modern spacecraft have completed their missions, it will continue to exist, invisible and enduring. It is one more layer in the peaceful complexity of the Saturn system, a silent companion to the rings and clouds, extending far into the darkness while remaining hidden from view. In the quiet reaches of the outer solar system, Saturn turns beneath the distant sun, carrying with it not only rings and moons, but also an immense and invisible magnetic world. Though unseen, this vast environment is part of what makes Saturn such a remarkable place. A giant planet wrapped not only in clouds and ice, but also in unseen forces that move with patience and grace through the endless silence of space.